Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by Challenger. At Challenger, we want to help you ensure that your retiree clients can meet their retirement needs today and tomorrow. To access thought leadership, insights, and tips on retirement planning for your clients, head on over to challenger.com.au/XY.
Welcome back to the XY Advisor Podcast. We are talking all things about the changing landscape of retirement, and I'm joined by a CFP, Self-Managed Super Fund Specialist and Aged Care Accredited Professional, Senior Financial Advisor and Confidant. I love the Confidant part. Welcome, Nicola Beswick.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Tell me about the Confidant part. How does that work in?
I think it works by showing clients exactly what we do. If you look up the definition of confidant, it's about trust and people sharing trust and having complete faith in what we do, particularly in the financial planning space. As advisors, we're so hung up on our titles and we love like all the letters behind our names and all of those, showing that we're accredited and we know the technical side of things. But I think that ultimately it's about creating trust and relationships with clients.
Yeah, it's amazing because you've got plenty of letters after your name and you've got plenty of titles and accreditations. And then to me, that what stood out from the human being point of view was that personalization part where you just say, yeah, actually I've got a nerd brain, but I'm also actually a human being and I've got empathy.
Exactly. That's ultimately a big thing for us financial advisors is that empathy piece and putting ourselves in the client's shoes and saying, I get you. I hear what you're saying. I understand it. Ultimately, I feel that's what clients want more from us is for them to know what we're saying and what they're saying and that we get them.
Yep, fantastic. Now, couldn't help notice there is an accent there coming through from my homeland, actually, from New Zealand. Tell us about your story. How did you sort of end up in Australia?
I ended up in Australia because I was offered a job in Melbourne through a law firm. So I've had a few career changes throughout my little life so far, and that went initially from intellectual property law, working in a company initially in Christchurch, and then coming over to Melbourne in the middle of the GFC of all times, but completely great decision.
Yeah. So intellectual property law to financial planner. I guess this is probably moving towards your personal values and having a human connection with your clients versus just the legal side of things.
That's right. I changed careers purely because I really saw the benefit that financial planners have for people. My change from law essentially into financial planning was quite random, but really has set me on a path to where I am now. It started with my dad. He was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis about the age of 55. He didn't fit the box. It took a lot of medical professionals to work out exactly what had happened with him, but that initial point of his diagnosis, it started with him losing essentially a lot of the use of his right side. So he lost his capacity to use his right arm, his leg. And when you think about most right-handed people, that can really have a huge impact on day-to-day life, including your working life. Dad was one of these really fortunate people to have income protection insurance, and that completely changed his outcome in terms of working. We know as financial planners the benefit of income protection, but to actually see that benefit someone, that's changed my thinking with looking after myself selfishly to start with. And then the more I learnt about finances, the more I just went, so many incredible things out there, that even little simple things that people just don't know. And I realised that you can, and no disrespect to lawyers here, but you can actually make a huge difference in the financial planning space. And I went, yep, full support of my partner, and I made the change, and it was just incredible. I don't regret it for 1 second. I absolutely love what I do. I love the people I work with, I work for, in terms of my clients. It's just such a rewarding profession.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me about your dad. Like, how old was he when he was diagnosed?
He was 55.
Yeah. And what possessed him to get income protection in the first place? Like, how was he convinced to pay for it?
I think he was one of these people that had it part of his employment. And I think that he would have at the time seen the benefit of having that, because he was the primary income earner through our family. I'm one of three. I'm the oldest, so I could imagine at the time, and we're talking, he was one of these people that worked for telecom back in New Zealand. So you could imagine just being in that role and having that as part of your package. It would be one of those no-brainers, and carrying it on.
Yeah, fantastic. So that shaped you as a human and said, okay, I want to follow this and I want to help people in that situation, or, you know, people in general. And the more you got into financial planning, you realized the more different ways that you can help people. And you very much look after people in that pre-retiree space and retirement and all the way through to aged care. Is this almost like you're helping people like your dad?
It is. It is. It really is. Because every client I come across, that's exactly the way I look at it. I just see you're someone's mother, father, daughter. You've been, we've all got stories. We've all been, arrived at where we're at because of particular things, and I do. I really do. He's probably one of my next to my partner, Mark, one of my biggest advocates for what I do. He is consistently liking everything I put on social media. He's always, that number one fan.
Yeah, it's great having as your parent as your biggest advocate, isn't it? Sitting there and and liking all your posts and sharing it. I guess it probably also helps that he's he is the target market of your client base, and you can certainly relate to that. Now, talk to me about how you help your clients now. You sort of help them as they're coming in that pre-retirement space. Let's start there. What are you seeing in the clients that are coming in at the moment?
I think a lot of them are quite overwhelmed with what to do and decisions to make. I have seen quite a number of people coming in wanting advice and not really knowing where to go and what decisions to make. A lot of them are finishing off work maybe sooner than what they anticipated. I had a gentleman a couple of weeks ago who contacted me purely because he was about to be made redundant, and he'd never really thought about it. He was one of these people that had always gone, I'm going to work until I die kind of thing. And then all of a sudden it dawned on him that he had to make some decisions. I see that as a common theme coming through, not only of someone who's been faced with retirement or redundancy, but that uncertainty, and particularly because there's so much in the media, that we get caught up with, what is the right decision for me, and how do I filter the noise that's around me.
Yeah, it's interesting times, isn't it, at the moment, with that stopping work sooner than anticipated. I think we've talked about some stats in and around this series regarding the concept of people not retiring when they plan to retire. In fact, not very often do people actually retire on the day they plan to. This work scenario, I guess, in a situation where a lot of people, a lot of businesses are sort of up and down, a lot of people are finding themselves on the wrong side of that. Their occupation being one of the ones in the economy that's not being that's suffering, I guess you could say. How is that going with a lot of people? I mean, obviously, you mentioned there was a lot of uncertainty and worry and fear.
I think a lot of people are also, for the first time, being very aware of how superannuation's impacted, and what superannuation actually means. A lot of people don't really pay attention to it until they're about to retire, or something's happened to a parent or a sibling. And then they start going, I've got to look at this. I've got to work out what generally is my largest asset that I've just contributed to is going to work for me. And then depending on what someone's situation is, there's a whole range of different asset mixes and investment returns, particularly with what we've seen in the last just over 12 months now. And I think people have started to sit up and take notice.
Yeah. I was going to say that you sort of mentioned there that, and what comes to my mind when you're saying that is the trigger event. It's often there is an event that triggers this, and COVID in a way has been the trigger event for some people.
It has. Trigger events happen to us all the time, all our clients all the time, death, divorce, injury. I've come across as well a lot of people who have been in unfortunate accidents, and particularly TAC. If someone can't work and they may be younger, those are the common ones. But then we have COVID, which completely has disrupted the way we live, the way we think about life, and then ultimately what happens from maybe an employment or retirement kind of position.
And so are people coming to you early enough?
No. That was a very definitive answer, wasn't it?
I think it's absolutely, yeah. It's one of those things that it should have always been, 10 years ago. How do we change that from the public point of view?
It's awareness. I think changing the time around when you start thinking about your future we get so caught up in life, families, what's happening with work. We don't really think about our future selves, and changing the mindset of, hey, I've got to really think about this when I'm 40, 50, in between that. I think it's more promoting small things that can be done really early on, not necessarily the, hey, go see a financial planner, but but here are the things that you need to kind of think about. And then when you're ready to take that leap of trusting someone to help you with your finances, then you can feel confident that you actually have got something from a education perspective behind you. There's so much information out there at the moment. It's really just distilling the key points of, was it the quote around the best time to plant a tree is either now or 20 years ago, and it's that exact same thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. There is a lot of information, but a lot of it still comes out in technical form. We sort of use jargon so often that completely confuses the public into thinking, well, I don't really want to look stupid, so I'm not going to ask.
Exactly. If we can almost distill the key things down into a layman's point of view where everybody can understand it. We're going to see more people being more active and proactive with looking after their future selves from that retirement perspective a lot earlier on. And that's going to have so many more benefits, not only for the individual, but families and then society in general, if I'm, thinking about that, because we're going to be so much more comfortable and be able to and ultimately enjoy our lives, which is what retirement's about. It's about actually enjoying the time that you spend working, but having that freedom.
Yep. Now, I want to challenge all planners listening to this that they should be out there, talking. And you mentioned awareness. I think awareness is the greatest thing, and it's about consistently delivering a message to people that says you are better off getting advice earlier rather than later. So there's a challenge out there to everybody to start spreading that message, I guess. Now, speaking of spreading messages, you do a lot of work, and I guess probably coming from your background, it makes a lot of sense with the Pro Bono network.
Yeah, I do.
And also, you do a lot of work with them, whether it's videos or other things, and obviously that's spreading awareness and messages. So tell us about that.
This is probably one of my equally exciting parts of what I do in the financial planning space. The Pro Bono network, we help match people going through a health crisis. So specifically, we've aligned with multiple sclerosis limited and with advisors that want to give a little bit back to those clients. And I'm really fortunate to sit on the board and help with the overall messaging that we're doing from an advisor perspective. But I've also become really heavily involved in working with Multiple Sclerosis Limited and producing webinars, information sheets that we deliver to their clients to help understand and convey the messaging around what a financial planner can do. And the webinar series has just been fantastic because we got given case studies from MS themselves that defined the questions and comments of actual real life people. And we've built this webinar series that's based on each of those individuals and how an advisor helped them. Now, it was all completely fictitious. We did embellish a little bit to help convey the messaging. But it's incredible because you are starting on that education piece so much earlier, and particularly with MS, it's the way it impacts someone is completely unknown. You actually, like, I'm fortunate because Dad his MS journey has been pretty stagnant, and his symptoms haven't really deteriorated. But I've, through my journey, met people where they go downhill pretty fast, and I've got I've worked with a lady who 63 and has to use a walker. And her son is the primary, not primary carer, but is always there. He's always helping her understand financial implications. And I think being able to convey what we can do from a financial planning sense not only helps the individual, but their families, their extended community, and so forth. And it's just, it brings that human element back to what we actually do as advisors and the way we can actually help people.
Yeah, incredible. So tell me about these. You do the webinars, they record them. So you sort of create a case study and you work out different ways that financial strategies might help this particular person. And obviously that's general information. It's about, that sort of stuff. But is that just sent to people that are diagnosed with MS? How's that distributed?
It's so the webinars are live. which is always quite interesting. But it's great. They've got a great team at MS Limited who do this on a regular basis. The webinars are also recorded while we're presenting them live, and they're up on their homepage, along with a whole range of other types of information that someone can access. We're able to also send out, or they have the slides attached to the webinar as well, so people can view those and access that when they're reading or going through the material. And that's particularly important because with one of the biggest symptoms of MS is cognitive issues and cognitive processing. And a lot of the content, the purpose for having it recorded is to allow people to go back and listen to it again and digest it, because finance is complicated to start with. And to try and distill it for someone who has no cognitive issues is always a challenge. But then to try and convey that information to someone who is going through a world of other emotions, that's probably one of the great things about it.
Yeah, and this is why I love recording these meetings and giving your client a copy of it, because that understanding is obviously a huge part of the new regulations, demonstrating that the clients understand. And if clients have got cognitive issues, then they could understand at a slower pace or a different way.
Exactly. And it's brilliant because there's so many times that you have client meetings, and I know that one of the things that we have in the code of ethics is to get clients' consent and understanding, and they know what we're recommending. The reality is, how do you test that? And how do you actually make sure a client understands? And being able to give someone, the advice document, that's what we've got, but be able to convey the information in a different way by a recording or something like that just helps educate and make sure that we're going above and beyond what is now being asked of us from a financial planning perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So talk to me about the pro bono itself, because I mean, obviously, people will probably be listening to this saying, "Well, how can we afford to give pro bono advice these days?" With the cost of financial advice for planners going up. You still have the overheads, you still have the liabilities, you still have the professional indemnity requirements, et cetera, et cetera. You still have the cost of producing a document if that's the way you're doing it. But tell us about that. How do you fit pro bono into or afford to pay pro bono advice?
The one thing we ask of any advisor who's interested is to meet with only one client a year that comes through that network. So the way that we process things is we've got a centre where requests come through from MS or people that have found out, and then the centre, they then contact advisors on the register who have expressed interest. The key thing is that a lot of clients that come through mostly will get through a one initial meeting where it's more that general advice side of things. So that isn't as onerous as doing an advice document, which obviously you need to do from a personal advice perspective. The way I have approached it personally is if someone needs personal advice, then I've done the advice document free of charge. But if there was an ongoing relationship that needed to happen, then I think we can't expect people to have pro bono work on an ongoing basis for something where there's an ongoing relationship. Mm-hmm. So I, and as part of the board that we've discussed this, is if it's an ongoing relationship then and the client can afford it, which is generally the case, clients can afford ongoing advice, then they just become clients and they fit into the natural fold of your business.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. And tell me, how do we highlight those planners and advisors that are doing pro bono advice, and even if it's one a year, like how do we put them on a pedestal within their profession to say these people have given back?
I think it's people not being shy that they are actually out there and willing to help. I think there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm here to help. And I think it's a great thing, because I think the public want to know that we care. And by saying, hey, I'm here and I actually are willing to help people, then that's great. I think we should not be ashamed of it and actually embrace that side of things.
Yeah, they're great words too, by the way. The public want to know that we care. Well done. I love it. So talk to us about, thank you for sharing that about the Pro Bono Network too, by the way. I think it's really important. I want to talk about the transition period from being a pre-retiree to being a retiree, and the time that takes, the change that goes on through somebody's life at that time. All the different things they've got to get their head around. Talk to us about that moment in somebody's life.
There are so many things going on with them. All of a sudden, they have been used to getting up, going to work, seeing the same people, having money come through from employment, and then for whatever reason, they're looking at stopping or finishing up. And it's not just the financial aspect that people get to and become really anxious about that, because all of a sudden they've realised that I have this money that I need to make sure lasts for the rest of my life, but I also want to enjoy my life. I don't know how long I'm going to live for, because we don't know. And then I've got my kids that want to potentially, I want to help or would like to help, but don't know if I can afford. And it's almost like a grieving process in some ways. They're going from something that they knew for the last however long to a new way of life. And so a lot of people, when I'm talking to them for the first time, it's not the facts and figures. I think that's the important thing. It's about that emotional comfort and that emotional stability, that they want to make sure that you can understand what they're saying and what they're going through. And that's very hard to do when you're obviously not retired and you're obviously still, working and you look probably 20 years younger than them. How do you convey that? It's an interesting conundrum, isn't it? But I think if you can create a space where you're being open and honest and showing empathy and understanding, then that's where you're going to get a lot more of the comfort for what you're actually saying to someone to do, and proceed to that next stage of actually becoming a client and trusting what you're saying on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, this is a really interesting way of looking at it, and I've never thought about this before. But the grieving process, you're grieving the loss of a career, or I don't want to say funeral for your career, but look, you are grieving that process, and that empathy and understanding through that process is exactly what is a really good way of sort of relating to it, or talking to people about the idea that there is a grieving process you go through.
It's like any change that we have. People like we attach a grieving process to people going through divorce, for example, and it is mourning the change or the loss, and whether someone's. It's interesting because people sometimes want to retire and they're ready to retire. But I still think it's that change of lifestyle, and humans are creatures of comfort and habit, and even if you want to stop work and you want to change that, then it's understanding that. It's understanding why someone's actually making these decisions or has to make a decision.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting way of looking at it. And I completely agree. There is a human behavioral element to this that's going to happen to every single human. So talk to us about the complexity at that time, because obviously this is a lot of concern around the complexity, around all these different options and confusion and anxiety that comes with this process. Talk to us about how that affects people's ability to make good decisions at this time.
Making good decisions when someone's anxious and there's so much going on is just hard to start with. And then you're, as a professional, sitting in front of someone to explain all this technical jargon. It can become very overwhelming. And I think, someone's retiring and you're talking to them about starting an account-based pension with your superannuation and the benefits of that, and they're just looking at you going, what? What are you talking about? And it's taking that fear of the unknown away by conveying, we know the benefits of an account-based pension, but being able to convey that in those layman's terms. If we can do that, then that helps ease the anxiety and the emotional stress that someone's going through at that time. And another element to that, as I'm thinking about that situation, a lot of people may not even know if they've got enough money to live on, built up, through superannuation. They might be anxious because they might think they have to sell their home to fund their retirement. I think now technology has become our friend a little bit with that, because there's so many great resources out there that can help model out, but in a simplistic way, all of those unknowns. So I find doing a couple of projections, and we all love projections, but having something simple that shows that's what people, it gives them a little bit of certainty and comfort that they can hang on to, and particularly if you can account for things that they would like to do, like the once upon a time when we could all go overseas and all those kind of things. You factor those in, and then that helps people feel comfortable about spending their money.
Yep.
Or making decisions about their money to enjoy their life, because you get different people in different schools of thought around when they retire. They've got a lump sum of money through superannuation, for example. Some just go, yay, I'm going to go and spend it all, and that's great. Others go, I actually don't want to spend it. I know it's there, but I'm so scared to spend it that I'm not going to, and I'm not going to enjoy my retirement as a result. So I find having conversations around what is that money for? Why have you worked X number of years and sacrificed a part of your wage to go into the system? What is it for? Why have you got that money? And if you take the non-financial reasons for retiring and explore those as part of a conversation or a series of conversations, I feel like that then creates a little bit more of acceptance around people going, hey, I am going to take that trip, and I am going to take 20, 30,000 out and go and enjoy that, because I may not be able to in 5 years' time. It's getting that balance of retirement. Yes, you do have to be aware that you've got this money, and it needs to work in a way that is appropriate for you, but you've also want to make sure you enjoy the rest of your life. And if you can, I love talking to people about that side of things. Is like, well, why do you have this money? What's important for you? What are the things that you would like to do in order to enjoy the time that we have left? Because we don't know what's going to happen. And I think COVID and what we saw through 2020 has showing that a little bit more for people. I think a lot of people have become very aware of what's important to them and what things that they do and maybe don't want to do. And if you have those conversations, it helps people be more at ease with spending money, and if you can integrate that information with projections, then it just helps, doesn't it?
Yes. So there's obviously a huge balancing act going on between, ticking their mental state, their emotional state versus, yes, you are financially better off by doing this. And getting people to make decisions based on both of those aspects. Talk to me about the technology piece again, because I mean, how are people that are in their retirement adapting to technology? Because there's obviously the school of thought that says they're in their retirement, we can't use technology with them.
It's whole technology thing is actually really quite interesting because I think age is probably one of the biggest misconceptions around the use of technology. I know people that are probably younger than some that just go, you know what, I don't want a bar of it. I want to talk to you over the phone. I don't want to have a Zoom meeting. I don't want to have a Teams meeting. I just don't know how to use it. And we're talking people that are maybe in their 60s, where I've come across people that are a lot older than that who embrace it, love it. They're on it. They're happy to set up a Zoom meeting or whatever. And it's quite interesting because we get, I think it all comes down to our mindset and our individual mindsets around the way that we perceive something that may be new and we don't understand. And it's just been fascinating, a fascinating experiment in somewhat, to observe the way that people have handled essentially working remotely, and what we have to do, whether it's clients or staff or anyone. We can't get back to New Zealand at the moment because of the bubble, no bubble thing, and we're constantly FaceTiming my partner's parents, and there'll be. I'm going to take a stab here. There'll be.
You'll get it wrong like every projection. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. They'll be in their mid to late 70s, and like his mum's all over it. They love it.
Yeah,
they love it. Yeah,
I think you're absolutely right. It's not an age thing. It's an attitude thing, and a willingness to make some sacrifice. I think it's also a willingness to take a risk in a way that you might look silly. Every time you start using technology, there's always a risk that you might get it wrong or come across strangely. So if you're not prepared to take those risks, it might be harder for those types of people. But
it's like anything, isn't it?
Yep. Now, tell me about as your clients go through sort of towards that aged care side, maybe they're a bit less active. What are you seeing in that for those clients? How's that changing, or what's coming up for them?
Generally, it's at that stage of life, it's more the children and the way a child or a family is dealing with that process. A lot of people heading into the aged care space, I put into two kind of camps almost. You've got a group that don't want to accept it and they don't want to know about it.
Yeah.
Where the second group they're making decisions and they're very aware of their situation and know what's going to happen. You have that type of aspect, and the way that a parent handles that then shows how the child's going to handle going through those decisions. Mm-hmm. If someone's a lot more pragmatic about what's actually going on and making decisions, it takes away that emotional stress that children, because ultimately the children are the ones making the helping make decisions at this stage. it makes it a little bit easier at such an emotional time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The intergenerational type, handing down of the attitude around it, because, when I think of my grandmother going into aged care, she was like she was planning it all, and it was her decisions, and she was making those choices, and she was going to go, and it was just she was the one that had everything organised, and so then that is just how I saw it happening as a younger human, and then that's probably shaped my attitude towards it.
Exactly. It's unfortunately, I think it's a not pleasant thing to go through, regardless of where you are within that spectrum of the family. I remember my grandparents when they were in a retirement home and then went into care. It shapes your way that you think about it. And I remember with my grandfather, he was actually in a motor vehicle accident, and my nana had to go into care because he was the primary carer of her, and then she had to, and that was actually a really horrible thing. From a 10, I would have been maybe 15 at the time. Where I look at my other grandparent, and she's in her early 90s, and she's still living at home. And it's such a different kind of way of looking at it. And
yeah, do you see that the tension you mentioned earlier around the idea of the kids of somebody going into aged care? It's a struggling time for them as well. Is that something that the person that's going into aged care would certainly be concerned and worry about, the fact that their kids are fighting, or their kids have got there's tension, or there's different ideas around what's going to go on, and everyone's trying to make decisions, and everybody's at a intense moment?
I think it depends on someone's capacity at that time and the reason they're going into care.
Yeah.
I've seen situations where it's husband and wife, and the husband's very aware of what's going on and the reasons why they need to go into care, where the wife, because of the natural progression from a mental side of things gone, maybe not as aware. I think if you're more open with, if a family as a collective is more open with what's going on from a care perspective and what someone wants, I think that emotional stress that's placed on the children is far less than compared to someone who doesn't talk about it. And I know it's one of these things that it's trying to talk about that is a lot harder than talking about retirement, because of naturally what it is and why.
It's the same conversation, isn't it? It's the being aware earlier, planning for it, and understanding that that's probably a grieving process to go through.
Exactly.
It's almost like the second retirement.
It is, isn't it? It is. And this is where I know particularly there's a lot of information out there around the different stages of retirement. And that is so true. And the grieving process is different people, isn't it?
Yeah. So we're certainly breaking some new ground here. We should be talking from a psychology point of view how we. But look, thank you for coming on and chatting us today about the changing landscape of retirement. There's certainly so many different aspects to it. Tell us about you and your practice and your business. What sort of things are you hoping to do over the next sort of little while, and what are you sort of going to be focusing on in the future?
One of the biggest things that we're looking at doing is really embracing the conversations that families need to have, particularly around as you lead into retirement. It's about looking after yourselves, but also your children, and we're going to see as a whole this intergenerational wealth transfer. And I think that that's one big thing that we're certainly talking about within our practice. But then I think that's one thing that I think all businesses out there are aware of. A lot of our clients are getting older, and it's about, how do you not only talk to clients about what they want to do, but then make sure that their children are on the same page as well. And then, not only so that's quite a big topic in itself.
That's a really big topic. I'm fascinated with the concept of intergenerational wealth transfers that happen, and then the corresponding investment profile of the money that transfers, like as in somebody that might have earned that money the hard way and really worked hard and saved their pennies and hates the idea of loss, handing that money on to a child who then goes and puts it on Bitcoin or something like that. It's like, how does that, it comes back down to, the money itself and does the money itself have a investment profile versus the human? So certainly interesting topics. We can get into that one.
I was going to say the whole profiling psychology piece is just huge in itself, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming and chatting to us today and coming on and joining us in the series. Really appreciate your help. If somebody wants to continue the conversation, what's the best way they can get hold of you?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. There's a whole range of contact details there: email, phone, or a message through the platform itself. So please do reach out. Love talking about all of this.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And if people want to get involved in the Pro Bono Network, how would they find that?
The AFA have a designated webpage that talks about the group and has a form that if you wish to become an advisor on our registered list, more than happy to connect through that way, or again, connect with me directly and I can put you in touch with the right people who manage that side of the process.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Nicola. Well, there you have it. Another episode of the XY Advisor podcast. I'm Fraser Jack and I'm joined by Emily Blanche. Welcome.
Hey, Fraser. Thank you.
Now we're off to our best part of the week where we do a bit of a shout out. And who have we got today?
Yes. So a dual shout out today for XY Advisors Elaine Huang and Nathan Bradley. So both have shared this week with referral opportunities for other advisors in XY. So they've both met with different prospects, really understood what they're looking for. These particular clients don't necessarily fit their demographic or their clientele. So they've gone out to the community to say, hey, who can look after these guys? Who can I introduce them to, which is amazing. So, making sure that clients are getting the right help that they need from the best people, and also allowing for referral opportunities for advisors in the community as well. So awesome to see such collaboration amongst XYs. So well done, guys.